What the vaccine does, said Dr. Reed, is it actually sequesters this protein in the blood and prevents it from making it to a tumor. And so we are actually starving the tumor. In Cuba, Simavax has been successful in extending the life of advanced lung cancer patients. You're tuned to Radio Habana Cuba, and this is Weekly Review, where we take a look at the week's top news stories here on Radio Habana Cuba. Thanks for joining us on this Sunday. And a major international news story we covered for you this past week here on Radio Habana Cuba was the resumption of negotiations in Havana between the government of Colombia and the FARC-EP. Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos confirmed early in the week that government representatives were returning to Havana to resume talks with the rebel organization. In an interview from Casa de Nariño, seat of the Colombian government, President Santos said that they would first meet in Bogota with a team of rebels' lawyers. Santos recognized that the topics on the agenda are complex, but said there is fluid communication with the guerrillas. On Wednesday, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, People's Army, the FARC-EP, and the government of President Juan Manuel Santos finally resumed talks in Havana. In a context of surging paramilitarism in Colombia, the new round is still pursuing new routes in discussing remaining topics on the agenda. Recent events like the armed strike promoted by the Usuga clan, the slaying of left-wing leaders, and the announcements of greater paramilitarism add tension to the ongoing peace negotiations. And also in Colombia, the National Liberation Army, the ELN, the second largest guerrilla group in that nation, released a former mayor and governor who the group had been holding for over 2.5 years after a deal was reached to begin peace talks with the government. Former governor of the Department of Choco, Patrocinio Sanchez Montes de Oca, was released outside of his hometown of Quibdó, near where he had been captured in August of 2013. The governor's release followed an announcement earlier by the ELN and the Colombian government that the two sides had agreed to begin peace negotiations. The talks are an attempt to end the 50 years of armed conflict in the country, which has claimed the lives of more than 220,000 people, many disappeared, and millions displaced. And as the situation in Brazil continued to deteriorate politically, Radio Habana Cuba reported this week statements by President Dilma Rousseff expressing that she will not resign from office. Those comments by Rousseff came in response to an editorial in the daily Folha de Sao Paulo that called for her resignation. To the editorial in the Folha de Sao Paulo on Sunday, this response from the president prevails: "I will never give up," read a message published on President Rousseff's official Facebook profile. The message was published along with a video with excerpts from several previous speeches of the president, assuring that she will not leave her post. In the statements, Rousseff charged that those calling for her resignation, quote, recognize that there's no real basis, unquote, for their demand. Mass marches and rallies have been taking place across Brazil in support of Rousseff. The massive mobilizations that have taken to the streets against the impeachment have done so under the banner of defending democracy against an institutional coup, as protesters define the situation. Then in midweek, President Rousseff confirmed her government's decision to end, through dialogue, the current political unrest hurting the country and its democracy. Rousseff said that from the beginning of her second term in office, the opposition had been trying by all means to slash her constitutional mandate. Meanwhile, former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva stepped in to demand that if the questioned Brazilian Vice President Michel Temer wished to become the new president, he had to first win elections and not resort to tricks in an effort to bring down the democratically elected presidency of Dilma Rousseff. During a meeting at the Metallurgy Union in solidarity with the Dilma Rousseff administration, Lula invited the unions to rally in support of the Workers' Party and the president, whom the right wing wants to smear in a case of corruption in connection with the company Petrobras and make Congress impeach her. And in more of the top news we cover here at Radio Habana Cuba this week, there was the Argentinian Congress demanding an investigation into President Mauricio Macri's involvement in the so-called Panama Papers scandal. Members of the Front for Victory Party along with other minor political groups in the Argentinian Congress, demanded an investigation into President Mauricio Macri's ghost company's operations in tax havens. In a press release, the political alliances demanded a special session of Parliament to try and establish a commission that would investigate offshore societies. President Mauricio Macri chairs two such companies active in Panama City. One started in 1986 and the other in 1998. The Argentinian MPs also demanded in writing the resignation of Laura Alonso, head of the Anti-Corruption Office, loyal to the president and whose duty is to investigate possible acts of corruption. Front for Victory claims that the head of state is also an associate in several offshore investments and in Uruguay, dating from 1995, which allegedly engaged in contraband. The paper El Cornubano Online, for its part, noted that the case of the Panama Papers also involved Macri's father, two brothers, his cousin Jorge Macri, head of Vicente Lopez Municipality, and the mayor of Lanús, Nestor Guindetti, both in Buenos Aires province. That's about all the time we have got this week. Join us again next Sunday for a weekly review, where we take a look at the week's top news stories here on Radio Habana Cuba. Thanks for tuning in. I am Juan Jacqueline.
You're listening to Radio Habana Cuba's English language broadcast on shortwave. We wish you the best possible reception. But don't forget that we are also streaming live audio on our website, www.radiohc.cu. For listeners in the Havana area, there is a third option, and we can be heard on cell phones, radios, and TV audio at 102.5 FM. Now our weekly feature, DX's Unlimited with Arnie Coro. Speak with the X, speak with the X, speak with the X. This is Havana calling. Speak with the X, speak with the X, speak with the X. This is Radio Havana calling all shortwave listeners and radio amateurs. Welcome to... Unlimited, Radio Havana's weekly feature dedicated to the fascinating world of radio communications. Hola amigos radio aficionados all around the world. Yes, the solar flux back to 100 level again. This is news, and this is the weekend edition of the Access Unlimited, your favorite radio hobby program. I'm Arnie Coro, radio amateur CO2KK, and here is item 2 of today's show. Radio amateurs continue with optimism to the quest for access to geostationary satellites, the one that you see right at a single spot. They don't move, apparently. Radio amateurs have a long story in the design, building, and using ham satellites. The first ones were described as medium-sized satellites in low Earth orbit and also using the elliptical Molniya orbits. But after the pre-launch opportunities as secondary payloads on a major launch just dried up, the attention turned to the minimum-sized CubeSats. Those are the ones now in progress. As part of the educational support program, NASA and other launch agencies provide free launches for CubeSats, where Russia, India, and China offer inexpensive launch opportunities too. The quest for a geostationary amateur radio satellite has always been there, but free launches into a geostationary orbit have up to now never materialized.